Hey, Stevie Nani here. Before we get to our junkyard crawl video for today, just a heads up, on October 1st, if you're in the Durant, Oklahoma area, I'll be there live at Spanky Assiter's inaugural Freedom Choctaw Collector Car Auction at the Choctaw Casino and Resort Event Center, again in Durant, Oklahoma, where a whole bunch of cool collector cars are going to get sold, many of them at no reserve. And I'll be on the stage live doing commentary. One of the best cars and most special cars in that event is going to be the actual 58 Chevrolet Impala, fully restored, that was once owned by Peggy Sue Gerron. Yes, that Peggy Sue, the star of several Buddy Holly songs. Pretty, pretty, pretty Peggy Sue. That was her 58 Impala. That car is going to get sold at no reserve, again, on October 1st at the inaugural Freedom Choctaw Collector Car Auction in Durant, Oklahoma, October 1st. Be there if you want to take a shot at that car and just check out a great auction. Okay, let's get right into the junkyard crawl here at Bernardston Auto Wrecking. Hey, Stevie Nani here doing the junkyard crawl at Bernardston Auto Wrecking with a 1961 Chrysler Imperial. Oh, I said Chrysler Imperial. You got to remember that the Imperial brand was its own standalone division from 1954 through 1970. So technically, this is an Imperial by Chrysler, not a Chrysler Imperial. With that out of the way, this is a very rare body style. It's a two-door, but it's kind of hard to see, so let's take care of that. You got to remember that in 1961, a total of 12,249 Imperials were built. Of them, only 1,896 were two-doors like this. So that means this is like 1 out of every 10, something like that. The others were four-doors, land yachts. But 1961 was the first of 3 years to utilize these standalone headlights, which were Virgil Exner's callback to the DeSotos and V16 Cadillacs of the golden era of the 1920s and 30s. And again, 3 years, 61 through 63. These are beautiful looking heavy metal chrome plated structures with die-cast outer rings. And again, a very strange looking car when you remove these things, almost like a skull with no eyeballs. Now under the hood is something pretty cool, as always. And speaking of the hood, this is the pancake style hood. Now it is sitting a little proud because this car is in a junkyard, but when this is closed, the hood cut line is flat with the top of the fenders. And that was something that the California customizers like George Barris and all the guys who used to do all that customizing, Chrysler took influence from them with the pancaked hood. Earlier, Chryslers and others would have a hood that came down like that, but here the pancake outline is clear to see. But underneath the hood, well, there it is. This is the 413, which appeared in 1959. Now, we don't want to confuse this with the 413 Max Wedge of 1962. A similar block, but the heads on this have smaller ports and valves than the 413. And of course, the Max Wedge has that big aluminum intake, whereas the Imperial 413 has a single 4-barrel intake made of iron, which would have taken a Carter AFB. But one thing that was new for 1961 was the alternator, which has been removed, but there would have been an alternator right here instead of the generator that would have been found in 1960. Now this car does not have air conditioning, which is kind of uncommon, but again, this does have torsion bar front suspension, which was used on these things from 57 on up. But one thing about the Imperial, it was very different from lesser Chryslers and Dodges and Plymouths and even DeSotos, was these are body on frame, and that basically makes them quieter. We can actually prove that point. This is collectible automobile from June of 2005, and that's cool, the Dodge Charger 1, that crazy roadster show car on the cover. But inside, the story of the 61, 2, and 3 Imperials. And we see here, it says here, body on frame. From a product standpoint, a quiet and smooth ride was paramount in a luxury car, and many automotive engineers felt that keeping the body and frame as separate entities allowed the vehicle occupants to be better isolated from unwelcome noise, vibration, and harshness that could be more easily communicated to the passengers in a unitized body. Then too, Lincoln's less than satisfactory experiments experience with the design and manufacture of its 58 through 60 unitized behemoths suggested that there might be a full-size size frontier that unitized bodies should not cross. So again, up through 1965 or 66, these were body-on-frame cars. Heavier cars, and again, quieter like a bank vault, and also very popular with demolition derby users, unfortunately, because these things were almost indestructible. The only thing that could take out an Imperial at the demo derby was another Imperial. Now again, we see here these huge 15-inch wheels on these things with the big 5 on 5.5 bolt circle. So this is not something you can use on your Dodge, your Plymouth, or even your Chrysler. This is a specific bolt pattern right here, used only on Imperial. But again, here's that two-door body style right here. Again, 1957 was the first year for Chrysler's forward look, but again, 61, the final year for tail fins. 1962, these things would go away. But what an amazing and huge statement this is. And again, this car was longer than a Cadillac in 1961. Now here at the back, again, we see those big, massive wheels, 15s with the 5 on 5.5 inch bolt circle. The full floating axle with the nut and the cotter pin at the end right there. Actually semi-floating, I should say, but again, it's a tapered axle shaft right there. Not a lot of fun to work on, but you gotta love the styling on this thing. And one thing I will say, despite the fact that this was like a $5,900 car, 3 times the price of a Valiant, there are still some shortcuts. We can see the inner and outer quarter panel stampings are put together, spot welded, and then covered with a chrome trim, which hides the seam right there. Now, there was a thing called the Imperial Crown Limousine, where this stuff would have been lead finished by the Italian coachman at Ghia, and that would happen, but then that was only on the top level Ghia limousines. Now, inside the trunk, we see the massive compartment. And again, this void in the back was what made these things killers on the demolition derby circuit. You put this thing in reverse, push the button, of course, the torque flight transmission, put it in reverse and use this big void in the back to take out your opponents while preserving your engine and transmission and rear axle to fight another day. But again, this one here, just little details that add up. This is the flight sweep deck lid, and that spare tire was an option. And in fact, this was first seen, I believe, in 1957 as part of Virgil Exner's forward look. Some people call this the toilet seat. I don't know. Is it a styling flourish or a flush? You decide. But other details we see on the back that are pretty cool are the way that the gas cap filler is right here behind this little panel. You lift that up, and there's the filler for the gas tank. You got to wonder how many thousands or tens of thousands of gasoline went into this thing from 1961 till the time it was taken off the road. Only the clouds know. But again, just beautiful little flourishes and touches on this thing. And this would have had, you say, where are the taillights on this thing? There's no hole, there's no lens, there's nothing. Well, these actually had hanging jewels. They were sort of like a big chrome thing, sort of like the front headlights that hung down from a mount right here. I mean, just crazy styling. You know, beautiful and elegant. And in fact, Imperial sales brochures said it was richly elegant. I guess so. But again, the two-door body, very, very uncommon. Look inside, and this is pretty well shot, spent, gone. The rust has totally taken over. No manual transmissions in any Imperial after about 1952. And here we see, this is where the push buttons used to be, arranged on a vertical pattern right there. And this is a 1961, so it does not have the 727 torque flight, the aluminum one that came in 62. This has, for the final year, the A466 iron torque flight, which is a pretty decent tranny, but again, very heavy. But that's lurking under that transmission tunnel. Would have been controlled again by those buttons. Now this one again would have had a leather interior, a bent seat, although swivel buckets were an option on Imperials in 1961. In fact, the final year for the swiveling bucket option was 61. But an interesting relic from Chrysler's past, but again, don't call it a Chrysler Imperial. It's actually an Imperial, which was the case through the 1970 model year, when in 71, the Chrysler Imperial name returned, and the Imperial was nothing more than a gussied up Chrysler Newport or New Yorker. But again, this is the end, or the end of the line for the fins on the back, and of course the beginning of the line for these crazy exposed headlamps, which were Virgil Exner's nod again to the classic Imperials of the 1920s and 30s. But this car is probably not going to be going pretty much anywhere. Still has a lot of good parts on it. The 413 theoretically could be turned into a hot rod type engine if it's not frozen or cracked. who can say? But to learn more about these things, well, you can Google them or pick up an old magazine like this. And to learn more about the relics we find in the junkyard, come back tomorrow for yet another video here on the Steve Magg's YouTube channel, doing the Junkyard Crawl.